Hello, welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm back with some more updates coming out from the war between Russia and Ukraine, and I've got several big topics to discuss here with you in today's video. We're going to start off with this story that we see here on your screen. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, announcing today that North Korean troops are expected to be in combat zones as early as Sunday. Okay, so he reported this on X. We'll go over his post here in just a minute, stating that the North Korean soldiers are expected to be deployed by Russia to combat zones as early as October 27th or the 28th. Okay, so that is either on Sunday or Monday coming up this weekend. Okay, so very big news in regards to that. We're going to be talking more about North Korean soldiers entering the war. And also, we have a report coming out today from Russia that Russia has raised its key interest rate in their central bank from 19% up to 21%. Okay, this is a record that's been set for the last 20 years. And this is a show and a major sign in Russia that their economy is being battered right now. We know they've been dealing with inflation for years now, and it is definitely getting worse. And the war inside of Ukraine is definitely putting a heavy toll on the Russian economy. So they're raising their interest rates to try to stabilize their economy. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that today as well. Then we also have a report coming out from the Kursk region. We had Oleksandr Syrsky, the commander of Ukraine's armed forces. He updated Volodymyr Zelensky today and gave him some official numbers, apparently showing how many losses the Russians have been taking, how much equipment they're losing, how many soldiers they're losing. And we're hearing upwards of almost 18,000 Russian soldiers have either been injured, killed, or captured in the Kursk region, according to Oleksandr Syrsky. Okay, so we're going to talk about that as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into the news. I've got several things we're going to share with you here today. So let's start off here on X with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. This is his post as of today, October 25th, 2024. He says here, I received a report from Commander-in-Chief Syrsky on the current situation at the front line, with particular focus on the Pokrovsk, Kharkov, and Lyman directions. In the Donetsk region, the situation remains difficult, but our combat brigades are holding their positions and doing everything possible to destroy the occupiers. On the Kursk operation, we are fulfilling our objectives. The buffer zone on Russian territory helps secure Ukraine against Russian attempts to expand the war in the east of our state, and is inflicting significant Russian losses. The commander-in-chief provided details on the task and our units are carrying out in designated areas of the Kursk region. So we'll talk about those numbers here in just a little bit when we get to that post. He also reported on Russia's use of North Korean military personnel. According to intelligence, the first North Korean soldiers are expected to be deployed by Russia to combat zones as early as October 27 to the 28th. Okay, just like we discussed. This is a clear escalation by Russia, which is significant in contrast to all the misinformation widely circulated in Kazan these days. So he's talking about the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, that was held. Vladimir Putin was there. Many other BRICS members were there. And they also came out saying something about the Kursk region. I think Vladimir Putin was stating that there was like 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers that were encircled in the Kursk region, and apparently the Kursk region was falling apart for the Ukrainians. So we have some information from Oleksandr Syrsky today, him coming out saying and refuting these claims from Russia, and Vladimir Putin stating that they're being surrounded over in the Kursk region, him stating that actually things are going okay for the Ukrainians. So we'll talk about that in just a bit as well. So it says here, the world can clearly see Russia's true intentions to continue the war. This is why a principled and strong response from global leaders is essential. North Korea's actual involvement in combat should not be met with indifference or uncertain commentary, but with tangible pressure on both Moscow and Pyongyang to uphold the UN Charter and to hold them accountable for this escalation. Okay, so obviously Volodymyr Zelensky calling on Western allies to put pressure on Russia and also North Korea, considering that North Korea is joining this fight. So this was a major statement coming out from Volodymyr Zelensky today. So again, what we're hearing is by as early as this Sunday, we could be potentially seeing North Korean troops in combat against Ukraine. Okay, so that was the huge news coming out today. Max 24 reports, based on our intelligence, I can confirm that Russia is deploying at least 1,500 troops from North Korea, says the Dutch defense minister. Breckelmans. The first special forces will be probably deployed in Kursk region. This significant escalation requires an appropriate response. So that's the big question again, is how does NATO respond to this? I think right now what they're waiting for is official confirmation that the North Korean troops that are deployed to Russia right now are actually there to fight against the Ukrainians. I think to most of us, it's pretty obvious why they're there. They're not there for sightseeing or just hanging out in Russia. Most likely they are there to be deployed to the front line. Why else would Russia have these troops over here? Okay, so obviously the West right now, it appears that they're waiting for official confirmation that the North Korean troops are on the front lines fighting against the Ukrainians. Once we get that information and it is confirmed by the United States and NATO partners, that's probably when we will see them move to make some sort of decision on how they're going to respond to this. Now, will it be militarily? Will it be maybe more partnership with more nations down in the Indo-Pacific region, closer to North Korea? I think that's a possibility of something we will see. But the big question is, will NATO get involved militarily by potentially even sending troops? Will the front line have an issue with Ukraine trying to hold back the Russians now if all these troops start showing up? We'll see what happens and how NATO responds to this, okay? We don't have that information as of yet. Next to reports, South Korea's intelligence service said that North Korea will send more troops to Russia, okay? This was reported on Bloomberg today. This is huge. The publication quoted, the intelligence service is saying that according to documents, the first group of 1,500 special forces is already being trained in the Russian Far East as part of the deployment of about 10,000 North Korean soldiers. The South Korean intelligence documents also provide details on the scale of arms shipments from North Korea to Russia. Pyongyang has reportedly sent Moscow about 8 million North Korean-made 122mm and 152mm shells, about 100 Hwasong 11 missiles, and Bullseye, I don't know if it's Bullseye, 4 anti-tank weapons since last August. Okay, so this is a huge report as well coming out from South Korea's intelligence service stating that North Korea is going to be sending even more troops than what has already been sent. So we know upwards of 10 to 12,000 have already been deployed to Russia. Looks like they're going to be sending even more, and this is probably not a surprise to many of you that are listening to this right now, that obviously the North Koreans were planning to be sending even more troops, and this is what something that South Korea had warned previously, that this would probably not be the end of this. They'd probably be sending thousands more, maybe even tens of thousands more to be deployed to Ukraine, okay? So huge news in regards to South Korea. Now we're going to talk about Russia's central bank here. Next to reports, the Central Bank of Russia has raised its key rate from 19% to 21%. This is a record for the last 20 years. The last time the rate was at such a high level was in 2003. Then it had been systematically decreasing since 1998, when its value reached 150%. Raise the key rate in the Russian Federation in order to slow down inflation. This will affect many aspects of life in the Russian Federation, from increasing the cost of loans to slowing down growth of the economy in general. In the context of economic instability and sanctions, the Russian authorities are trying to stabilize the financial system. By the way, the key rate set by the European Central Bank for October 2024, is 3.25%, in Ukraine 13%, and in the US around 5%. So look at how much lower the European Central Bank, Ukraine, and US have their key interest rates set to, okay? So anywhere from like 13 down to 5%, depending on which country you're in. And also look at Russia, okay? Russia's up to 21%, and they just raised theirs to 19%. I think it went from like 17 to 19 or 18 to 19. It went up like 1 or 2% just in the last few months, we had reported. Now again, they've jumped it all the way up to 21%, reaching a major high record in Russia. And again, this is a major sign that Russia's economy is being battered by this war. And then also the sanctions that are being put on Russia, I'm sure that is putting a heavy toll as well. So Russia's just spending money like crazy right now trying to upkeep this war. And then imagine now they're paying all these North Korean soldiers. So Russia's spending a lot of money on war right now, and it's definitely causing lots of inflation in their country. So also moving on now to military news UA. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, announced the losses of the Russian armed forces as a result of the Kursk operation. There are 17,819 personnel in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So this is what's been reported as losses, apparently, from Oleksandr Syrsky on the Russian side. Okay, it says of them, irreversible, 6,662 persons, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, these are people who have died in battle. And then sanitary, I believe, is people being injured. Okay, so 10,446 injuries, and prisoners 711 people. Okay, so if I'm wrong on these numbers when it comes to sanitary and irreversible, let me know down in the comment section, but I believe that is what those stand for. Okay, so it says here in weapons and military equipment, 45 tanks, 256 combat armored vehicles, 565 units of automotive equipment, 99 artillery systems, 5 rocket salvo systems. Okay, so assuming these numbers are correct or at least pretty close, that is pretty heavy losses. Okay, 18,000 personnel of Russian forces. That's a pretty large amount. Okay, what we know, excuse me, just alone in the Kursk region that's been reported from the Ukrainian side is that upwards of 50,000 Russian troops are operating in the Kursk region trying to push Ukraine out. So just 18,000 alone, that's a pretty heavy loss right there alone. And then just look at the amount of weapons and equipment that's being used by the Russians as well that's been lost. Okay, well over 1,000 or close to 1,000 just systems and vehicles that have been destroyed as well from the Russian side. So pretty crazy to see that. Okay, moving on to our next update from War Translated Dmitry. Syrsky refuted Putin's claims about the encirclement of Ukrainian forces in the Kursk zone, stating that Ukrainian forces continue active operations. They're consistently reducing the enemy's combat capability despite heavy pressure. As of now, Russia's lost close to 18,000 troops there, of which nearly 7,000 are irreversible losses. Okay, so some of these numbers we just went over right now on that other post. So it does say here, like 6,662 people irrecoverable. So these are obviously the deaths. So I was right. So sanitary is wounded, 10,000 people, 711 prisoners. Okay, so we went over these numbers, but it says up here, the statement made by the leader of the aggressor country at the BRICS summit regarding the encirclement of Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region does not reflect reality. This is blatant disinformation that does not represent the actual situation. Ukrainian forces continue active operations in the Kursk direction, consistently degrading the enemy's combat potential for the third consecutive month. Despite intense pressure from the adversary in this area, the occupiers are suffering significant losses in both personnel and military equipment. Specifically from August 8th to the present, Russian forces in the sector of the front have incurred the following losses of personnel: 17,819 people. Okay, so this is Oleksandr Syrsky, the commander of Ukraine's armed forces, coming out and refuting the claims that Vladimir Putin was saying that there was something like 2,000 or more Ukrainian troops that were encircled in the Kursk region, essentially saying that the Kursk region was starting to fall from the Ukraine, but apparently we have this report coming out from Oleksandr Syrsky saying the opposite, that their operations are still going to plan, and things are actually, for the most part, okay over there. Okay, so we have seen that that the Ukrainians have lost some territory over there recently, as the Russians have launched some offensives, mainly on the western side of Ukraine's current military operations in the Kursk region. But we also have seen some areas that have been regained by the Ukrainians as well. Okay, so it looks like it's still pretty intense up in the Kursk region nonetheless. Also from Max 24, only 30% of shells fired by the Kremlin's forces recently were Russian made. Of the remainder, 60% came from North Korea and 10% were Iranian made, according to Bloomberg. Pyongyang has sent approximately 8 million rounds since August last year, the analysis showed. About 100 Hwasong-11 missiles as well as Bolsay 4 anti-tank weapons have also been detected on the battlefield in Ukraine for the first time. So we talked about these weapons being sent to Russia recently from North Korea. But this report up here showing that only 30% of the shells fired by Russia are actually Russian made. Okay, the rest of them either come from North Korea or Iran. So that's pretty huge. That shows that maybe the Russians don't have a huge stock supply of shells that are being fired, and that's why they're having to borrow lots of equipment from North Korea and also Iran. And we definitely have been seeing that recently. The North Koreans supplying a heavy amount of weaponry over to the Russians to use against the Ukrainians. Okay, so huge report coming out today. Also from Glasnost, German arms manufacturer Rheinmetall has handed over 20 additional Martyr infantry fighting vehicles to the Ukrainian armed forces. This is the latest. Martyr order was financed by the German government. Okay, so here's some pictures of some of these Martyr infantry fighting vehicles that are used by Ukraine, and looks like they're going to be sending 20 of these over to the Ukrainian armed forces to use against the Russians. So pretty huge order being sent to Ukraine very soon. They're going to be getting 20 of these. Okay, so moving on to our next update now. So we've had multiple mainstream news publications covering this story right here, and it says from Max 24, a few months after Russia began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, satellite imagery captured unusual activity at Sergiev, I think it's Sergiev Posad 6, according to WP. It had once been a major research center for biological weapons, viruses that cause smallpox, Ebola, and hemorrhagic fevers. Okay, so we have some satellite imagery dating back all the way from, it looks like, early 2022. And if you notice, as the time moves on all the way to 2024, that this whole site has been developed, okay? It basically was just forest here. There was a couple buildings. It looks like they've been expanding this site and building more of these warehouses and storage buildings, whatever they might be doing here. And apparently this was a research center for biolabs at some point in the past, and they have now been expanding this. So definitely kind of worrisome, right? Hopefully we don't see some sort of biological event happening over here in Ukraine. And maybe that's what the Russians are doing over here, maybe not. But it looks like, according to this information, this place has been developed over the last couple of years, okay? And they're expanding it. So very scary to be seeing that. Hopefully that will not be the case. Also here, we're not going to watch this video because it doesn't have any subtitles, but I want to show you this information, okay? This was Vladimir Putin speaking at the BRICS summit. He was being interviewed. It says here, Noel reports, no concessions or compromises on Ukraine, says Putin. Any outcome must favor Russia based on the realities of the battlefield. We're not considering any concessions or trades, he stated directly. So he was basically asked if Russia was willing to trade or concede any land that's been taken previously by Russia and give it back to Ukraine. And he came out saying that no concessions or compromises would be made on Ukraine. He did also mention that they would be willing to make reasonable compromises. So we're not sure exactly what those compromises would be, but that is something that he stated, that they would be willing to take reasonable compromises with this war with Ukraine whenever they come to negotiations. But right now they have not been negotiating, so he was not willing to go into detail on this. But definitely he's coming out saying that any outcome must favor Russia, okay? So they're not going to be willing to give up any land. I mean, imagine they've worked very hard over the last, almost 3 years now, just to take the territory inside of Ukraine. And many people were even thinking if Ukraine would fall within days, that's something that Russia said, they would march on to Kiev within days or weeks or something like that. And it definitely did not go that way. So, look at how hard they worked just to get the amount of territory inside of Ukraine. And now they even have the Kursk region to deal with right now. So it's going to be very interesting whenever Ukraine and Russia start to negotiate. We'll see if they do that here in the next few months, or at least by next year. Finally, one last thing to show you from Belarus. This came out today from Anton Gerashenko. An attempt to incorporate Belarus into Russia will turn into war, says Lukashenko. Some people in high circles of Russia are eager to annex Belarus, but the attempt to do it will turn into a war. You are smaller, we are larger, and we have such and such an economy. We will help you and then join Russia. This is not the way to ask questions. It is impossible and unrealizable. I'm even afraid to say that that it's a war, Lukashenko said. According to him, he doesn't understand why Russia should annex Belarus. In fact, Lukashenko understands everything perfectly well. Putin is desperately short of soldiers. Soldiers from North Korea do not cover this shortage at all. That's why Putin has long had his eye on the Belarusians who are right on the border with Ukraine. Lukashenko is now the master in Belarus and has relative internal autonomy. He is absolutely not interested in Belarus becoming a part of the Russian Federation and in sending Belarusians into meat assaults in Ukraine. This would shake his power. Lukashenko is interested in making money on the war and wriggling out, and that's exactly what he does. Okay, so here's Alexander Lukashenko and also Vladimir Putin as they were speaking at one point. And this is something that was being talked about by several people on X today. This was a statement that came from Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus. And apparently, some people inside of Russia are eager to try to annex Belarus, potentially dragging Belarus into the war. And, this could definitely be a potential sign that maybe Russia definitely does need some troops. I mean, they even just borrowed some equipment from Belarus recently. I know lots of like armored personnel carriers and vehicles were being transferred from Belarus over to Russia to help out with the Kursk region. That was back in like August, I think, that we heard that information coming out. So looks like Belarus is definitely very worried about potentially being annexed by Russia, apparently. So who knows if that's going to happen, but we've been wondering what Belarus is going to do. They recently deployed many of their troops and equipment to the border. Even Ukraine was calling on them to move away from the border and, don't start anything with them. And even Alexander Lukashenko was warning Ukraine about an invasion, that Ukraine might try to open up an incursion into Belarus. So I don't know exactly what's going on over here, but definitely seems very strange with Belarus. Belarus kind of getting dragged around different directions. Apparently they are worried that they could be annexed by Russia. So that would be absolutely insane if that were to happen. And maybe that's something that Russia may try to do at some point to drag Belarus into the conflict. If this is really true that Russia is short on supplies and men. Okay, so some huge updates coming out from the war between Russia and Ukraine that I wanted to share with you guys today. And I hope you did get something out of this. If you did, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. With that, I hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.